This week, I interview trader and creator of intuitive development training, Ray Burchett.
You know, it's a profession. It's not get rich quick. And it requires the same level of commitment as any other profession. You know, folks think that they're going to come in here and start making money after a couple weeks or a couple months or even after a year are really delusional. That's when I believe the hallmark of a genuine professional is a trader, that they have such awareness for the market, such an understanding for the mechanics, such clarity what's going to give them that advantage in the market, and they know if they don't wait for it, they're slitting their own wrists. So bottom line is we want to replace anxiety and frustration with certainty, confidence, and commitment. The more tangible understanding we have of our process, the more we can commit to it. And again, the more certain, confident we become, we know what, why, how, we have that much more energy to develop awareness for when. And when we have great conviction for our strategy, when we do get that alignment, it's a heck of a lot easier to consistently execute. So that all comes from that foundational trust. There's no substitute for trust. There just isn't.
From the outside looking in, it can sometimes appear that peak performers have an elusive talent or skill that sets them apart from the rest of us. However, what usually sets peak performers apart isn't what they can do, it's what they will do. You are listening to the Trading Edges Podcast, the podcast dedicated to seeking and sharing the best ideas and principles from peak performers across all domains of performance and achievement to help you discover your full trading potential.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Houston, and welcome to episode 18 of Trading Edges. Now, in this week's show, I interview Ray Burchett. Ray has well over 30 years of trading and trader training experience, having spent many of those years trading at the CME and running and owning a number of trader development companies. And in this show, we delve deep into the topic of trader development. And one big takeaway I got from our conversation was around the critical importance of quote-unquote trust in our trading. Now, we hear a lot about trading psychology, and we spend a fair bit of time on this show talking about this topic. But oftentimes, as I think about it, at the root of many issues that are diagnosed as being trading psychology related is the question of whether or not we can truly trust our methods and ourselves. So let me ask you if this rings true with you. Where are you with your trading? Where are you struggling? What's keeping you from being able to trade at your best? And lastly, when your trading actions deviate from your intentions, what's the underlying cause? Think about that for a second. Now, how much of this is based in a lack of either belief or conviction in either your system you trade or how you will personally respond to uncertainty? How much of it is based on having a lack of confidence? You can see that you can't have confidence without trust. So before we go into the show, let me ask you one final question. Where do you think you need to develop to begin to build trust in your trading? Drop me a line on the blog. I'm curious to hear your answers. Anyways, as always, I hope you enjoyed the show. You can find the show notes, transcript, and resources at thetradingedge.org/episode 18. And if you're enjoying these podcasts, please help me by leaving a positive review on iTunes. I have one other small announcement. If you're in the Montreal area on the evening of November 24th, 2015, we'll be hosting our monthly Montreal Traders Meetup. I'd love to see you all come out. as this will probably be our last meetup of the year. So drop in, say hello, and let me know you're a listener of the show. Anyways, come over to the blog to get more information on the event and to RSVP. Now, on to the show. Hi, Ray. Welcome to the show.
Houston, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you on. So to kick things off, let me just quickly introduce Ray Burchett, and then I'll ask Ray to perhaps give a bit of a background on his experience with the trading world and what he's doing nowadays. But first off, a little bit about Ray. Ray practiced as a CPA for Arthur Andersen for a number of years. Then he spent a good 20-plus years trading as well as serving as a member at the CME and serving on a number of committees there. And for the past 30 years, he's also been, like I mentioned, a trader, but as well he's had his hand in developing and training traders. And he's a developer of a system around development called the Intuitive Development Training Method. And that work really fascinates me. So what I really want to get into the call today with is perhaps we can talk later on about your methods in terms of how you actually develop traders and this idea around building up intuition. But why don't we just first start off from the beginning? So Ray, why don't you quickly let us know? Did I cover off your background there? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, pretty much. I started at Andersen here in Chicago. I was with them for about 19 months, and I had two younger brothers that were already trading, and they just had been trying to pull me in, and I was resisting because I'd gone through a pretty tough program in college and worked hard to pass my CPA, and had was right where I wanted to be as far as working at Andersen in their small business audit and tax. And I was actually starting on my master's in tax at DePaul, and finally I just gave in to their pressures and jumped all in on trading. And well, I shouldn't say all in. I was fortunate enough to be able to do tax and accounting work for some friends on the evening and on weekends to pay my bills. But I jumped into trading, and after about 18 months, I almost quit.
Wow. And so your brother's already involved with trading at the Merck? Is that how you kind of got in there?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
They were both pretty much off the charts right from the beginning. And I was just, I think, too intellectual, if you will. And I just, after about 18 months, I had it. I told my dad, I've got my CPA. I know I can get my teaching certificate. So I was going to go teach accounting in high school and coach football. And he's like, you've never failed at anything. You probably just need to take a different perspective. Why don't you just step back and give yourself a chance to do that? So I did. And that was really the start of, I didn't know it was intuitive development at the time, but I was racking my brain trying to figure out, why could I succeed at everything else, and why was, trading such a struggle? And I mean, I am, no stranger to hard work. And anyway, and I'm sure there's a bunch of your listeners that are probably nodding their heads, yeah, busting my butt, and I'm getting nothing. And that's how I felt. So I said, I got to stop running into the wall. I've got to take a new approach. And through that, I realized that I was so locked in on figuring out if price was going to go up or down. I wasn't doing what I needed to do at the foundational level to be able to have the awareness I needed to create a future vision of price movement. And as a trader, it's all about staying ahead of price movement. So that kind of gave me the shift I needed and got me into open air, if you will, and started to get a little bit better from there.
So is that, you think, a very common journey for most traders is, they kind of struggle in the beginning, and if they're willing to stick in there, that they begin to do some deeper examination and realize that maybe all the answers aren't necessarily, kind of outside
Well,
and baked into the charts?
yeah, there are so many traps, if you will, that traders fall into, and I get into this uh, in my training. In fact, it's basically a good chunk of the first of 4 training sessions, really helping traders understand all the stuff that is negatively impacting their development and performance. And we only have an hour for the interview here, so if I started to get into all of that, number one, I don't have the time to lay the foundation for it. Number two, I wouldn't be able to give it justice. But I will say, here's just a couple quick things that I'll comment on. Is number one, our ego telling us we can control things that we can't, know things that we don't. That keeps us from developing the perspective we need to be successful. The second thing is the trading proposition itself is highly seductive. It's either going to go up or down, right? How hard can it be?
Sounds simple, right?
Right, I can buy or sell. And then you have the arcade environment, all this power created by technology.
Right.
I've got all of this now. And, I'm a smart guy. I know how to use a computer and technology software. Boom, boom, boom. Got it all, right? All I got to do is, just click. I'll be stacking the cheese in no time. And so, and that whole environment of sim trading, that creates some very significant learning gaps and bad habits too. So you put all of those things together, and the deck is really, really stacked against the trader coming in. And then the other piece on top of that is not really understanding who we're competing against, not knowing the enemy, the institution,
so knowing
the
your
high
competition,
right, the fair value, the central banks, not understanding all of that and what a retail trader needs to do to compete against that. So, you put all of that together, that's a lot of stuff. And I guarantee you about 99.9% of the traders, none of that ever crossed any of their minds.
Mm-hmm. They're probably wondering, well, how does that really apply to me? Isn't it just a buy and sell kind of thing? How do I, all these other players and all these other strategies, how do they even overlap? And you're right, it's going to take a lot of time before that bakes into the trading process. Right,
and the starting point, one of the things that I guess the best way value that I give traders at the very beginning is I help them gain perspective. Really develop a deeper understanding for the challenge and what's necessary to meet it as a trader. And it's a profession. It's not get rich quick, and it requires the same level of commitment as any other profession. Folks think that they're going to come in here and start making money after a couple weeks or a couple months or even after a year are really delusional. I mean, they're drowning in their own ego.
Their expectations are way out of line, right?
Well, I tell my students, look, you have to give yourself some time to understand the environment that you're in. And I can certainly accelerate that process, but there's no substitute for doing your own reflective work, coming to terms with this environment in your own way. And then once you start to come to terms, now you can start figuring out, I shouldn't say figuring out, but now we'll start trusting ourselves, allowing ourselves to start to pay attention to things with a deeper level of commitment. And then it takes time to go down that road. So you put those things together, in my mind, you're looking at least a year of study and reflection, and just call it calibration, if you will, to get to the point now where you can really be organized to start developing as a trader.
And that's a deep work. That's not just like looking at a few things, at nighttime. You're talking a full year of development and not just...
Well, what I'm talking, it's set up to be done part-time. In other words, I always tell people, never quit your day job.
Right.
So the way I set up my development is that there's on-demand learning modules, that there's the basic and advanced, and they have access to that for a full year. And then they have the ability to interact with me live online 6 out of 7 days a week. And so literally every morning they can come into the daily briefing and have Q&A. And then every evening I send out the chart book, and it's specific to the E-mini. That's the learning S&P E-mini. That's the learning example. So they can measure their assumptions against how the market performed and understand what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. So that brings down anxiety, gets them focused for the next day. And then on Sunday evenings, I do a Sunday evening review where we can take a deeper dive on the functional stuff, and that's really a directional trading strategy that I teach as an example for how to compete against the institution, the high freak, the fair value, the central banks. So it allows someone to basically put the time in when they have going through the basic and advanced training modules, and then come in and do the daily briefing, do the chart book, come to the Sunday evening review. And at the end of this week, I just got all my stuff up in an LMS. I'm pretty excited about it. But what this does is it allows me to house the recordings of the daily briefing and the Sunday evening review very easily.
Yep.
So even if literally folks get the benefit of all of this on their own schedule. Nice.
So maybe we can just backtrack a bit on that one big idea I thought you shared, and that's that time components to developing as a trader. Like you said, you can't really rush some of these things, as there's that time element where it takes a certain amount of time to actually integrate some of these components you talked about. So going back to your story, how long did it take you then to begin to turn it around? You said 18 months, you're kind of at a bad place. How long did it take you to kind of turn that situation around?
After that 18 months, once I started understanding how I was working against myself, I started getting pretty good traction very quickly.
Nice.
And, and then the real earnings started kicking in about another 12 months after that.
Yeah.
But, to the point where I knew that I could support myself as a trader, and was able to let go of all the other tax and accounting work I was doing on the side.
Did you find good mentorship or coaches in your brothers or anyone else at the exchange?
Well, here's the beauty of it, and this is, I got down there and I, expected to have some insight and guidance, right?
Yeah.
And the insight and guidance was the only way this works is you got to figure it out on your own.
Wow.
Oh, and I did get another good piece of advice. You have to be either a fundamental or a technical trader. You can't do both. So that was the advice. And
wow. I would have thought your brothers would have helped you and, and carried you a bit.
They couldn't verbalize what they were doing.
Wow. Okay.
Again, we come from a very athletic family. And so they were able to internalize in their own way, and that's where the connection is to intuitive development. What I really did was link high performance to intuitive function, and took this out of the abstract, if you will, and made it very tangible. And that's why the training is so exciting for people. People go through it, they start connecting the dots for them. And they're like, wow, I should have known that. How come no one else has done this? And so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so how did you get into coaching traders? What was the transition and what was the motivation around that?
In 97, January of 97, the internet I could see it, starting to come mainstream. In 92, I created my own database. This is when you could buy TradeStation.
Yeah.
And so, for what was going to cost me a 3-year commitment from Bloomberg and about $80,000, I ended up replicating for myself for about $14,000 with a $245 a month data feed, exchange fee to FutureSource. And so, I literally, it was all landline back then, and I had a PC MIA modem for my laptop, so I could literally modem into my desktop and follow the markets anywhere. It was pretty cool, even though
that was cutting edge. That was cutting edge.
Yeah. So anyway, as things progressed, I had, I was in it, if you will. though I was in the pit all the time. I wasn't very little screen trading. So I saw in 97, I said, these guys that are off the floor, they're at such a disadvantage. They're not even aware of the latency, what they're seeing as quotes and what's happening in the pit. I mean, it can be literally points away, not ticks, but points.
Yeah.
And so I had this idea to start this company, and I did. I co-founded it with a guy, Steve Prosnewski, that I was partners with in Clerks, and called Local Knowledge, and we formed it in January of 97. And then that summer, when the Merck lost the competition for the Dow contract to the Board of Trade, that was a game changer. Bill Shepard, who was the chair of the technology committee, I happened to be fortunate enough to be on that committee with him. He created the E-mini as the answer. And, this was all very hush-hush. None of us knew any of this. I went on the technology committee after this all came out. And that was a game changer. And so it accelerated what we were doing at Local Knowledge. And we started covering more and more markets. And I had that company for 7 years. We literally had the fastest feed in the business. We were direct quote vendors for the Merck and the board. And in 2001, we had some internal things happen that was, I guess, a blessing in disguise, and went to a new data partner. And their technology was just unbelievable. We were literally seconds faster than anyone else. And the reason why our new tech partner just sent the minimal amount of data. In other words, if you were just trading the S&P, that would be the only quote they would send you. Where everybody else, and us included, when we were vendors, were sending the whole pipe of data. So they were very fast, very efficient. I mean, that was literally 3-4 seconds faster than FutureSource.
Wow.
And their technology basically got gobbled up by NASA and Homeland Security after 9/11, and they didn't want to concern themselves with futures trading anymore.
Okay.
So we went out of business. And I stepped back and took everything that.
And were you trading at this time as well while you were running that company, or you were just focused on running that?
I was in the pit and doing Local Knowledge. It was absolutely crazy the amount of hours I was working, plus being a dad, and it was absolutely nuts. But so anyway, all of that morphed into in 2005. I founded Archimedes Partners to commercialize intuitive development. And then that's kind of taken on a life of its own. I have Trust First, trust1st.com, which is my intuitive development for traders. And then this past year, actually the relationships began in 2011 with Homeland Security. But this past spring, I did a pilot for senior intelligence officers in 8 states. And that went very, very well and led to the forming of Accelerated Intelligence LLC. And so now we've got a whole other initiative going in the intelligence community, and then also for business professionals and entrepreneurs. So,
wow. So it takes all the kind of the big macro concepts that you kind of researched and found worked in trading, and now you've been able to apply those same big concepts across different domains. Is that right?
The deeper I got into this stuff, the more common denominators kept validating themselves. And so remember, trading is just about decision making. And so we've got to have the best information to make the best decisions. Yeah. And if we can organize that information in a very efficient way, we can start accelerating our ability to make good decisions. Now we get further and further ahead of price. Yeah. So what I was able to do was really lock down the beliefs and behaviors that cause us to filter, process, and apply information most effectively, and in turn, that accelerates everything else. And so that is universal in application, and we're getting more and more validation for it. So
powerful, powerful.
And so it all started. All of these things started to come together um, trying to figure out the best way to support development of off-floor traders through local knowledge.
Right. And I've heard you speak in the past about, the idea that you kind of need to have this kind of three-legged stool. And I think you call it, having the functional parts down, the psychological parts down, the practical pieces down. Can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of the development of traders and why that's important?
Sure. And please, everyone understand I am not a psychologist. I only use that word out of necessity because everyone understands the psychological component is, how we feel about something, how at peace we are with something, if you will, a level of trust for ourselves and our environment. And so the three components, functional, obviously, is our actual decision making within the market.
Yeah.
And then the practical, or I should say in the practical part of it is really the foundational stuff and how we're developing the awareness we need to make good decisions.
Okay.
And the best way to understand all of this, I like to use the analogy of driving a car. When we're flying down the interstate at 70, 80 miles an hour in pretty good traffic, right? We all have a future vision. In other words, it is our awareness commitment to the rules of the road at a functional level, plus all of our experience, traveling and operating a vehicle, but at that deep foundational level, everything's based on the rules of the road, and that allows us to create expectations for how the traffic around us is going to behave in front, behind, and to the sides, so we can develop a future pattern, if you will, right? And so it's that awareness that we develop at the foundational level by trusting the rules of the road, creating that future vision that drives our functional decisions about speed and the lane that we're going to be in, navigation, if you will, right? And so we're going along driving and we're unconsciously making all these foundational decisions, creating a future expectation of traffic behavior, a future pattern, right? And that's driving all of these unconscious functional decisions about speed and navigation. And we're doing all this while we're having a conversation or listening to music or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And out of nowhere, we'll take evasive action, avoid an accident. Now we get that adrenaline rush as we become consciously aware of everything that just happened. But it all happened at a deep unconscious level when we recognized that the pattern had changed. And so that triggered that functional adjustment that kept us safe.
Yeah.
So that's a powerful example of intuitive function happening that fast. Well, what happens?
Daniel Kahneman calls it that system 1 and system 2 thinking, as you kind of describe it there so perfectly.
Yeah. So I call it foundational and functional.
Yeah.
But most traders, they're zooming down the highway at that functional level with no rules of the road, no ability to create a future vision, to have reasonable expectations for predicting the behavior of price, because they never took the time to put in that foundation for a whole bunch of different reasons. Their ego just has them accelerating into a bad wreck, or their ignorance or laziness, or however you want to put it.
Yeah.
So that's, the legs of the stool. It's that practical, really the foundational, the psychological is trust, if you will, and then the functional is what we're actually doing when we're interacting with the markets.
And the way you develop traders, is there a priority in terms of the sequence in which you would develop, a trader, or is it really dependent on how that person's showing up, to trading?
There's an absolute sequence to it, but the sequence is universal in application. In other words, I start out helping people to really understand the depth of the trading challenge, what it takes to meet it. In other words, the risks and threats to their development performance. Right. And I take them through a process that lets them become acutely aware of their current state within that context, and that gives a developmental baseline.
Yeah.
and then we start moving forward from there in a very orderly fashion. And so the way we go forward through practical, familiar examples, I really raise awareness for the power of intuitive performance, and I extend that into their own personal experiences to make it tangible.
Yeah.
And then I identify the elements that cause intuitive function to occur, the core beliefs driving their development. And then in the third session, we get into the behaviors that best support development of those elements. We begin to learn how to build that internal engine that optimizes decision-making and execution. And again, that engine is what's creating that foundational awareness that we need to make the best decisions at the functional level. So it's integrating the foundational and functional stuff to optimize decision-making and execution. And then in the last session, we get into practical application, how to add horsepower to that engine, how to maintain it, how to really stay in the process. It's going to make the most out of our time and effort.
Mm.
And then once that, and they're encouraged to repeat the training cycle multiple times, because the first time through, it's mixed emotions. They're really excited about what's possible, and they're aggravated that nobody told them this stuff before. So they miss a lot, not because they want to, it just happens. So then get through it a second time. Now they can have a much better understanding for what they're in for, what they want to pay attention to. And then they really start to connect with things at a tangible level. Then the third time through, they've likely experienced consciously the benefits of being ahead of price. And so they just want to go deeper and deeper. And the interesting thing is, the further along someone has been in trading, I've worked with a lot of experienced traders, the more they want to come back and go through. And I've had a gentleman come from Dubai, another from Hong Kong a couple weeks ago. Another guy was very successful before he started working with me. He'd gone through it, cycled through it 4 times. He came to Chicago to do it with me live a 5th time. So that's the beauty of this. I'm just teaching folks a process. It's not like one and done. Now they have this system that they can use to keep elevating their awareness and becoming more and more effective.
Nice. And so what are your thoughts on that psychological piece? Do you believe that the trader has to have had some ups and downs first before they can begin to develop that side of their trading, or is it something they can develop, right away, while they're in sim and where they haven't been burnt yet?
Well, let's, for the record, I hate the word psychological. So let's, I'm going to substitute the word trust for psychological.
I like that, okay.
Okay, so we have to trust ourselves if we're going to be independent thinkers, right? Mm-hmm. Independent thought taps into our creativity and imagination, and then that starts integrating our skill, knowledge, and experience so we can create that future vision. Go back to driving the car. We have to trust ourselves to follow the rules of the road. We've got to trust everyone else that everyone else is going to follow the rules of the road, right?
Right.
And we have to trust a whole bunch of other things too. But without that trust, no one's backing out of the driveway. So in trading, in my mind, so many people jump in without ever realizing that they don't have that foundational trust that they need to support their functional decision making. Mm-hmm. So they just crush themselves from the very beginning.
Right.
And so to your point, just step back and pick any profession: engineering, medicine, accounting, law, even music or sport. I mean, look how much time and effort it takes an athlete to go out and compete just at a high amateur level, let alone at a professional level. Or for a doctor, or for an engineer, or for a lawyer, right?
Yep.
It takes a chunk of time and a very targeted development path, and then a great support system around that. Mm-hmm. Well, most traders never put any of that in place. And so that's what I do for them.
It seems like to me then that trust and confidence are very tightly interweaved, right?
They're everything. If you talk to any successful trader, and I'm sure you have, they will consistently share the same observation, that they can never be too patient in waiting for market alignment and too consistent in their execution. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's understand it takes a lot of energy to be patient, right? And the energy to be patient only comes from one place: trusting ourselves, trusting our process, trusting our future vision. When we have great conviction for what we anticipate the market to do and what it's going to look like and what it's going to trigger, it's a heck of a lot easier to wait for it.
Right.
And when we have great conviction for our strategy, when we do get that alignment, it's a heck of a lot easier to consistently execute.
Mm-hmm.
So that all comes from that foundational trust. There's no substitute for trust. There just isn't.
And so traders who feel like they have to chase price, or that they beat themselves up if they're unable to comply with their trade plan, it all boils back to trust. They don't really believe or have that foundational understanding that
the foundation just isn't there. So they've got to step back, and they have to be willing to do what's necessary to put that foundation in, and that's what I do for them.
Yeah. And so is there ways to work on these elements outside of trading so that you can bring those elements into your trading? Or is it something you have to work on only inside the domain of trading?
No, it's universal. In other words, it's these same core beliefs and key behaviors that develop the awareness we need to make the best decisions in everything that we do.
Yeah.
And in other words, there's not a Dr. and Jekyll thing going on in genuine professionals. They're the same person.
Right.
And this is, kind of sad because we've had all of this cultural messaging, that we can be two different people. I go to work and be absolutely ruthless, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And somehow I'm going to come home and be a loving husband and father.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
There's a disconnect there.
Right. And the most successful folks get it. They at that foundational level, they have such conviction, it just keeps them on an even keel in everything that they do. And that's what makes them an easy target for other people, because they're so jealous of that person being on an even keel. People will attack them instead of wanting to change so they can do what's necessary to compete with them in a similar manner.
And so what are some of those habits of, let's say, peak performers? What are they embodying or bringing into trading, or what are those sort of key habits that you've noticed in traders who are kind of really accelerate or exceeding or achieving?
Well, number one, they have a highly efficient process. In other words, they know the information that matters most, and they know how to get through it most effectively and apply it. And then the second is they've got a very active curiosity. They're like a 5-year-old always asking why, except they've got the discipline to stay after it and find the answers. And then the third thing that I would say is that they just are driven to take themselves to a deeper place of understanding for what they know already works. In other words, just more and more affirmation and validation of why these core beliefs and key behaviors are causing us to filter, process, and apply information so effectively. Why are they always leading us to the work that matters most, preparing us to do it best? Why are they the engine, if you will, that are driving me higher on that exponential development curve?
Nice. Yeah. Powerful. And so, if you flip the script then, you look at the traders who, aren't where they want to be, what are the common blind spots? Where are they getting hung up? Is it around, you mentioned expectations already, that's obviously one of the big ones. What else have you noticed?
Well, another big one is their ego.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah.
they can't get past the fact that they can benefit from guidance, that they need to step back. They can't, understand that they don't know it all.
Hmm.
And I guess my best visual is, if you remember the cartoon, the Coyote and the Roadrunner, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, about 99% of traders are the Coyote.
Right.
They just keep crashing and burning. They keep doing the same thing. They think
They don't get why.
that they're going to catch the Roadrunner. It's never, ever, ever going to happen
Right.
because they keep doing all the wrong things.
Yeah. You
And
see a
so,
lot of traders that bring this element of doing, right? They think, oh, I just work hard enough. I'm a doer. I'm used to working really hard in my other, jobs or other professions when I've been very successful. I just need to do more. You kind of shared with us already that, that's not necessarily the path that's going to take you to the next level.
Jesse Livermore in Remnants of a Stock Operator.
Yeah.
Great book. It's really the only one that I ever remembered about trading that stuck out for me.
Yeah.
I forget the exact quote, but I think it's the earning is in the waiting. And that's when I believe the hallmark of a genuine professional is a trader, that they have such awareness for the market, such an understanding for the mechanics, such clarity what's going to give them that advantage in the market. And they know if they don't wait for it, they're slitting their own wrists.
Hmm.
So in reality, we're going to spend well over 90% of our time waiting for the market to align with what we want to do.
Yeah.
And it's tough because we watch the market and all these people are always trading.
Yeah.
And, why shouldn't I be in there? Why couldn't I could have just sold that and bought them here or bought them here and done that and made money. I got to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just sucks people in. But, and this is what we sort through in the trading. There's so many things that have to be balanced out: strengths, weaknesses, personality, risk tolerance, all of these things. We've got to find what the sweet spot is for us, and then we've got to leverage the hell out of it.
Yeah.
Remember, we only have to learn how to do one thing. And if we can consistently do that one thing, and that one thing gives us 5 chances a month, and we can leverage the hell out of it, I think we're all going to be pretty happy as traders, right?
Yeah, I love that idea.
And so through the advanced training and teaching this directional trading strategy, I help traders learn how to find that one thing and then develop the ability to wait for it and leverage the heck out of it.
Mm-hmm. And so as it pertains to, let's say, trading, for instance, you talked about the ES contract, and that's a notoriously difficult contract, especially for new traders, as that contract, is probably one of the deepest contracts in the world, and it has the best and the best playing in that pool. It's definitely a deep pool of players there. It seems like that contract, I don't want to get too deep into baseball, but I think it's interesting. It's something about the way that contract moves, and maybe you can, give us a historical context if you want to share that, but it seems like that contract is very, very good at playing with people's emotions and kind of like you said there, tempting people to want to do things when they're not ready to do it, or when they maybe should not be doing it.
Right. Well, that's why less is more, and that's why my advanced training is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because I teach folks what to look for and show them the conditions that have to come into play to dramatically improve their probability for success, and certainly limit their exposure, their risk. And so once they get through basic training, this foundation, and then the advanced training is practical application of that intuitive development process through technical analysis, strategy formation, and trade execution. So they see how that future vision is being created and all the awareness that comes with that, and the trust and the energy that allows us to wait for these things and consistently execute. And so it washes all the way through, and they see all of this stuff coming together. I make it real for them. They see it actually happening, And then if they give themselves a long enough time period, to see this and develop trust for it. In other words, I can tell folks a whole bunch of stuff, but unless we can internalize it and validate it on our own terms, it has no staying power.
Yeah.
It's like my 8th grade teacher always said, you either want to do the work or you don't. And if you want to do the work, I can help you. If you don't, nobody can help you.
So true. And so where does this element of an edge come in? So is, in your mind, so when you talk to traders and they have an edge, is it, and aside from just, talking about just systems that have positive expectancies, but where else can people, kind of play in order to develop some of their edges? Well, it's going to make them kind of unique and run at their best.
Right. Well, let's understand what an edge is. It's the developing awareness that allows us to buy or sell before everybody else, right? Or anybody else.
Yeah.
And so that edge comes from our ability to be locked in on the information that's most relevant and to process it most effectively.
Yeah.
And so that's what the intuitive development process does. To me, the edge that is priceless and the edge that genuine professionals have is they just consistently achieve and sustain deeper levels of awareness, giving them the ability to see and do before others.
Yeah.
And so when we learn how to formally develop and support intuitive function, now we can start creating that edge for ourselves.
And how much more does this become important as the days of HFTs are, we see more and more HFT players in the market, more and more traders are becoming automated. It just seems like this element of having your decision-making process really locked down and tuned in. Is there, in your opinion, is there going to still be a place for the discretionary trader?
Absolutely.
In the next little while?
Yeah, let's understand the high freak guys. We call it the arms race, if you will. It just it has really come down to a refinement of technology. And so in advanced training, I really get into creating awareness for the conditions the high freak guys really like to participate under.
Mm-hmm.
So we let them have those places. There's plenty of opportunity to compete where they're not going to be highly incentive to participate.
Mm.
So we just take them out of the equation.
Yeah.
And those guys are trading for a tick. The retail guy is not going to succeed trading for a tick.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you think that the discretion trader has a lot of opportunities left in the electronic trading space, or do we need to all move towards a semi-automated or fully automated type of approach?
Here's what happens. When we go to a semi-automated or fully automated approach, what we're doing is we're really abdicating decision-making to technology.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We've created a set of parameters, and now we're relying on the machine to recognize when those parameters are aligned and to execute and to then execute according to some rules, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we need to understand a whole bunch of stuff. Trading is an incredibly dynamic environment. And the shelf life of a trading strategy, it's constantly being fine-tuned, and there's always new strategies being created. It's very, very dynamic. And if we aren't immersed in what's going in the market on a daily basis, we're not going to have the awareness to adjust.
Hmm.
And so once we abdicate, there's no incentive to do the work. If we're not doing the work, we become obsolete.
Right.
So I show people how to do the work very efficiently, and the more efficient we become, the bigger picture we see, the further ahead we get of price, the more energy we have because of the trust that's built through all of this work, the more energy we have to patiently wait for the setups that are going to give us the highest probability.
Hmm.
And that same trust, that same energy is going to give us a conviction to consistently execute.
And then that's, you can turn that around, right? Once you're dialed in, you can turn that around and still, decide to go semi-automated or automated, but you said you have to stay in the game. Otherwise, you'll become obsolete.
Well, again, the beauty of this is when we understand it so well, we don't need automation. In other words, we understand what we want to do, why we want to do it, how we're going to do it. We've just all our energies available to be external to recognize the when to enter and exit.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of liquidity. And so when these things come along, if we want to buy, we're just going to buy. If we want to sell, we're just going to sell. We're not worried about getting in at a precise tick because that's never going to happen. So we change expectations. We understand the conditions that's most supportive of our success. We wait for those, and we don't need a machine to execute those.
Yeah, it's interesting because you see a lot of traders who are looking into automated systems or semi-automated systems, and in a way their motivation for looking at those methods is because they don't have a certain level of trust in themselves. They want to outsource that to a machine so that they don't risk feeling vulnerable or feeling some of the ways that they don't like to feel when you don't have a proper amount of confidence in your trade system or methodology. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, look, nobody should trade. I have a golden rule that I teach my customers, and it's very simply this. We only want to turn our screens on. We only want to give ourselves the opportunity to participate in the market when we're certain of state, confident of strategy, committed in our ability to wait for market alignment. Again, nice. We know what, we know why, we know how. All our energy is available to develop awareness for the when.
Yeah.
And so what I do every morning in the daily briefing, I share, we go from global all the way down to that directional trading strategy, if it's being played out, if it's being set up, and, just keep verbalizing what it is that's allowing me to be certain, confident, and committed, and what the triggers that I'm anticipating. And they just see daily reinforcement. We may not get a directional trading strategy for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they come on top of each other. We got one late in the day on Friday. We got one yesterday morning.
Yeah.
So 2 days in a row. I haven't looked at the markets today, but, over the course of a year, I stopped counting in the first week in June. Obviously, it's different all the time, but by the first week in June, we had already 33 or 34 of these directional trading opportunities in basically 5 months' time. And sometimes we can get a whole bunch in a month, sometimes we'll get a few, but when you see how consistently these things play out and the risk-reward around them, and the advantage, how consistently they give us advantage over the institution, the high freak, the fair value, the central bank understanding why that's all there, the easier it becomes to wait for these.
Right, yeah. And so, we've spoken about energy already, and I know you've spoken about the relationship between energy and anxiety. So can you talk a little about that relationship?
Well, sure. They move inversely to each other. When anxiety is high, energy is low. And if we can just keep pushing anxiety down, energy is going to stay up high. And so one of the big things that I teach in the training is just how to stay in control. In other words, what we need to do whenever we feel anxiety present to take back control and keep ourselves plugged into the intuitive development process. So bottom line is we want to replace anxiety and frustration with certainty, confidence, and commitment. Distraction and conflict with information and knowledge flow, knowledge transfer. And so that's what the intuitive development process does because of the alignment it's creating.
And the energy, is that's physical energy, mental energy that you're talking about, or just like kind of the patterns of what it is to be confident and have trust? And
right, that energy comes from trust. In other words, being in the intuitive development process, we can draw straight lines to why we're best supporting our development and performance. In other words, we
Okay.
don't hear these little voices telling us we should be doing this or that.
Yeah, don't do
All
this, do
that
that.
goes away. We're just locked in on stuff that's going to best support our development and performance.
Right.
We see the foundation, we see the structure, we understand why that's going to best support our process, so now we're all in, we're totally committed.
Yeah.
And we become, if you will, consumed by the dynamics of the moment. And that's what intuitive function is. It's, think about uh, if there's something athletically that you really enjoy doing, um, or musically, or uh, a hobby or whatever, when we really get into something, we become consumed by it. And then when we get pulled out of it, we just have no conscious recollection for the passing of time, right?
Right. That's that beautiful state of flow.
Right. Well, that's what intuitive function is, because we're completely consumed. There's no friction.
Yeah.
It's like we're off in another dimension. All of our best is just flowing out of us.
Yeah.
Integrating skill, knowledge, and experience, we're most efficient as a value creator. And so
And I find that
that's
topic
where we want to
fascinating.
be.
Yeah. As we're turning off our levels of kind of self-criticism and self-awareness, we're then able to tap into those deeper levels of intuition that's kind of based on experience.
Well, instead of turning off, just think about stepping back from whatever perspective you have that's driving your development and performance, and be willing to say, you know what, I'm going to step back from this. There's probably a whole bunch of pieces I'll be able to pull in a little bit.
Yeah.
But let me understand how to put this foundation in place, so everything I start bringing back in is going to snap in like a Lego, and there's not going to be a wobble.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm going to be rock solid.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the intuitive development process. We've been kind of dropping bits and pieces of it. Maybe you can walk us through that. And I guess what's the ultimate outcome? Is it to begin to tap into our intuition and to use that in our decision-making process, or is there more to it than that as an outcome?
Let's get clear on the difference between intuition and instinct, okay? Sure. Intuitive function is the unconscious application of learned and developed skill, knowledge, and experience. It's our creativity and imagination integrating our skill, knowledge, and experience in a way that causes us to frequently realize and expand our potential. It's the product of all our good work. Okay, it's learned and developed. Intuitive function drives proactive behavior, drives our evolution. It creates that future vision.
Yeah.
Instinctive behavior is the unconscious application of behaviors shared by a species necessary to its survival. In other words, we instinctively know not to jump off the cliff.
Right.
If I were to take an aborigine from the outback, no interaction with civilization at all. Never seen an automobile, let alone driving one, right? But if I could somehow get him to sit behind the wheel of the car, he would not have any intuition, any learned and developed skill, knowledge, and experience to be able to drive the car.
Right.
Okay? So two different things. So now, understanding that intuition is learned and developed, doesn't it make sense that if we understood the foundation that best supported intuitive development, if we came from that place, that's going to start dramatically improving our probability for success? So we put in that foundation. Here's the thing. All professionals are intuitive to some degree. The most successful is consistently achieve and sustain deeper intuitive states. The scientific word for it is alpha. Our brain cycles at different speeds. We want to keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper into alpha.
Right.
And so intuitive development, is very tangible. I mean, we're not getting out oils or incense or wind chimes or chanting or anything like that at all. This has nothing to do with my training. Okay, this is just all nuts and bolts stuff that allow us to develop the understanding, the awareness, to create that balance and trust at the foundational level that have to be in place to support intuitive function that triggers peak performance and in turn causes us to realize and keep expanding our potential.
Mm-hmm. And I really like that distinction between intuition and instinct. I think that's the first time I've heard that. I like that distinction a lot.
Okay.
It makes it very, very clear that, one's a survival mechanism and the other, like you said, it's a kind of a deeper form of realization.
Right, it's driving our evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any kind of practices or that you could share with people where they can begin to start to get deeper in terms of, developing that layer of intuition? Or is it just a matter of, lots and lots of repetition, good habits? What's your thoughts around that?
I'm sure people put a lot of thought into it, over months or years, they'll find a path. I mean, that's what it took me.
Yeah.
And there's a, very precise path that I go through in the training to just take away a whole bunch of crud in a very short period of time to get to that developmental baseline.
Yeah.
And then it's just, the biggest part of this is to learn how to receive things in a new way. Really opening up our heart so things can get into our mind and go forward.
Nice.
So if we really want it, let's understand change is hard, it's disruptive, it demands accountability. And even simple things like, I always give the example, I was a quarterback and I went from the JV to varsity my, sophomore to junior year. The coach said, "Hey, Ray, if you don't stop patting the football, you're not going to play quarterback. It's slowing down your release, you're telegraphing your passes." And I wanted to play quarterback, so it took me about 3 weeks to break that habit. And I worked really hard at it, throwing a couple hundred footballs every day. And that's what it took just to break that bad muscle memory, okay?
Right.
Well, most folks can't get past their ego to even recognize they've got bad muscle memory to break.
Yeah.
But if they can get past that, and then if they want to do the work, develop the level of awareness and make the commitment, the accountability to achieve that and then do something about it, well, then they can have reasonable expectations for working through the intuitive development process. But most folks don't even realize they've got a bad habit that they've got to get rid of.
True.
And
So
this
true.
goes into so much cultural messaging about entitlement mentality and everything else, and just really help people understand how buying into that has just blown a big hole in their boat.
Yeah. Especially as it pertains to trading. That does not serve you.
It doesn't serve us in anything.
True.
Let's understand what really makes us attractive to each other, is creativity. I mean, we're having this conversation because you're attracted to the creativity of what I have to offer in trader development. And it's the same thing professionally. We're attracted to each other because of creativity. And then that attraction fosters collaboration.
Right.
And then we have innovation. There's great energy. We get to a better place.
Yeah.
Well, what happens is, as soon as we believe that we don't have to improve, that we don't have to change, now we become opinionated. There's no attraction in someone who believes they know it all.
Yeah, they're just defensive. You're trying to defend what you know, what you think is right.
Absolutely. And this is why this politically correct stuff is so detrimental, because it basically says I'm entitled to believe whatever I want and nobody can judge me. And I always tell people, think about the folks you have the most respect for. What happens when you have a disagreement with them? First thing they do is they get really quiet because they're running an internal inventory to see where they screwed up. They look internally first. And then they look at us and they want to engage because they really want to understand the disconnect.
Yeah.
Right? But that's what happens with genuine professionals, folks that we really trust. But the messaging out there is, if you and I have a disagreement, right, I can tell you, it doesn't concern you, you wouldn't understand, it's already been decided. I can say, hey, let's talk about that later. Or if any of those fail, I just start personally attacking you.
Right.
That's the environment out there today.
Yeah.
To a T, except for the genuine professional. And what I do is I help people to become that person that they want to be. I believe in our heart of hearts, all of us want to be our very best. We want to be genuine. And that's really the essence of intuitive development, that path to being genuine, having that great foundational trust, if you will, and then that generates the energy we need to think independently, and then all that other good stuff can happen.
That's beautiful, and it just ties back to we talked about this right in the beginning, that there is no Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, right?
Yep.
We're just one integrated. We're integrated. So if we try to play this game where I'm going to show up this way in my real life, quote unquote real life, and then this way in my trading, that's not going to happen. It's that's a game that's maybe a schizophrenic can play, but but no one else can play that game.
Well, there's no fulfillment in it.
Right.
This is the other thing people forget about where happiness comes. It comes from professional and personal fulfillment.
Right.
And that fulfillment comes from doing the work, developing the awareness to make good judgments, to be creative, collaborative, innovative.
Yeah.
We've got to do the work, and there is great joy in doing the work, and that's why the absolutes are so powerful, because they empower us to do the work most effectively, and in turn create the highest probability we're going to experience that professional and personal fulfillment with great frequency.
Nice. Yeah. And that's just such a higher order magnitude of being at the end of the day. You kind of really come from the highest state, so that's beautiful.
Well, all the messaging discourages us from getting there, because let's keep in mind that the media is the most powerful user of technology, and just look at our smartphones. Even when we go to the gas station now, the flat panels are up there pitching us while we're filling gas, right?
Right.
And media understands it's a heck of a lot easier to get someone to buy a product or a service or adopt a political or social belief, the means of their advertisers, if the audience is overwhelmed. Right? One less thing I have to worry about. Oh, thank you. I'll do that. The last thing they want to have to do is sell to an independent thinker. Because they know an independent thinker already has a really good understanding of what they need and why, and where they're going and why, and how they're going to get there. So they're tuning out all of that messaging even to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's in their best interest to discourage responsible conduct. That's why this entitlement mentality is just foisted on us 24/7. And I really bring that out, and people are blown away once I raise their level of awareness. Because the more we believe we're entitled to privilege without obligation, the less likely we are to do the work to add responsibly to meet those obligations. And all the joy is in doing the work. All the power, the building the trust comes from doing the work.
Yeah. But we just want to shortcut that and just receive the benefit.
And we're told we're entitled to it.
Right. You don't have to do anything. You just need to buy this thing. You'll be happy.
Vote for me and you'll be all set.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we're running a little bit long now, so maybe, Ray, I'll just shoot some fast questions your way.
Sure. As
we begin to wrap things up. But number one, I speak to a lot of traders who've been trading for a while, and they're doing okay. They're doing, they've crossed over the learning gap, that first little big hump. But now they're wondering, how do I go from kind of good to great? I seem to be stumbling backwards sometimes and taking 2 steps forwards and maybe 3 steps back or 2 steps back. Do you have any ideas of what a person at that path in their journey or that place in their journey, what could they do to take it to the next level?
Absolutely. Just the more tangible understanding we have of our process, the more we can commit to it. And again, the more certain, confident we become, we know what, why, how, we have that much more energy to develop awareness for when.
Yeah.
So that's why this training is so powerful. It takes someone that's already having success, and it really helps them to understand what's driving that.
Mm-hmm.
Now they can just trust themselves that much more, commit to it that much more deeply, and they've got that much more energy to get further ahead of the market, further ahead of price.
Nice. And so I'll definitely link to Ray's development process, his program. So if you go to the page of this episode, you'll see a link there. We can read more about it, as it is pretty deep. And I know Ray shared some of it today, but certainly not at a deep level. But Ray, where's the best place people can contact you or follow you or stay engaged with you? What's the best medium or place they can go to check you out?
My website is trust1st. So trust, the numeral 1st.com, trustfirst.com.
Awesome. So Ray, it was a lot of fun talking with you today. There's so many insights here. So I'm going to ask the audience, and I usually do this at the end of each show, but what's the one biggest idea or insight you got from the podcast? I'd love to hear from you and share with us, what was the one thing you heard today that kind of caught your ear and said, that applies to my situation and to my trading. That's something I need to think more deeply about. So let us know. Go to the show page. As usual, you can find the show notes, the transcript, and all these resources we talked about today on the website. That's thetradingedge.org/episode 17. Ray, it was a lot of fun talking today. Hope we get a chance to talk again sometime soon.
You've been listening to the Trading Edges podcast. We've taken this interview and summarized all the big ideas so that you can take action. Just head over to thetradingedge.org/podcast to find the show notes, transcript, resources, and to continue the conversation.